Hello everyone, welcome back to Sports Lumo. My name is Shane Dias. I'm a senior sports editor at sportslumo.com, and today we're going to start you off with something brand new. Yes, we are going to be looking at the best of international football. If you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing, liking our videos, sharing, commenting, and tap that bell icon if you're interested in more such content. But without further ado, let's get started on today's topic, and the focus for today is the England national football team. Now, England are something of a footballing anomaly when it comes to international success as well as recognition, because when it comes to success, they've not really had all that much. I mean, one World Cup win and no European Championship wins in this much time is not really that much for a country which has produced the Premier League, which is one of the strongest leagues in the world today and one of the most popular as well. Yet, despite all of that, it's safe to say that there have been a number of great players who have passed through the England ranks. But who do you think would make it in an all-time England 11? Well, that's a question that we're going to try to answer today. So without much ado, let's focus on who we think would make an England best 11. The formation that we're going to be talking about here is a 4-4-2. So let's get started. Now, the goalkeeper choice is easy. It has to be Gordon Banks. Now, there are certain footballers or certain sports people in general who, even though they have extremely distinguished careers, are only best remembered for one moment. Gordon Banks is one such footballer. If you ask anyone about the legendary English shot stopper, the conversation will inevitably go to that particular save that he made versus Pele in the 1970 World Cup. Now, let's take you back to that. It's the 1970 World Cup knockout stages. Brazil would eventually go on to win 1-0, but most people remember that match for the fact that Pele, who was clean through on goal, headed in a powerful shot and was so sure that the ball was going back in that he started celebrating before it actually crossed the line. Yet, despite the fact that he was sure it was in, Gordon Banks pulled off what is considered one of the greatest saves of all time. The shock on Pele's face, and indeed on the face of every other Brazilian player, told its own story. But Banks wasn't just a colossus of England football. After all, it's worth remembering, he started every single game in their victorious 1966 campaign. He was also very successful domestically, and till date, he remains the yardstick from which any great English goalkeeper is judged by. At right back, we'd have Gary Neville. Now, Gary Neville was someone who was part of Manchester United's vaunted class of 92. Yet, he remains unfairly typecast as a player who did only achieve success because he was surrounded by elite talent. Now, I mean, it's true that you can say to some degree that Neville was probably not as great an all-round footballer, did not possess that much in the way of speed, or indeed was not a very flashy player in the slightest. Yet, what he lacked in sizzle, he more than made up for in steak. Neville's greatest ability was the fact that he would work hard constantly. Just ask any Manchester United fan how we ended up becoming not only a good defensive right back, but over time worked so hard on his offensive game that his crosses were dangerous, his runs were dangerous, and he was an overall dangerous player, and in more ways than one, because he was an inspired leader when on the pitch. And he was not just an inspired leader, he was someone who took great pleasure in winding up opposition fans. Just ask Liverpool fans who had more than their fair share of verbal battles with Neville on the sidelines. Yet that doesn't take away from the fact that he remains till this date the greatest right back to ever come from England. At centre back, and probably someone who would be captaining the side, would be Bobby Moore. Now, if you think of English centre backs, you think of someone who's rugged, no nonsense, very good in the air. Now, Bobby Moore was the exact opposite of that stereotype. And that's not to say that he was bad in the air or was not rugged, but the fact is that Bobby Moore was the kind of player who placed more of an emphasis on the mind rather than the body. He favored technical skills over physical skills. He was the captain of the English side that won the 1966 World Cup, and he's regarded easily as one of not just the best defenders in England, but one of the best defenders of all time. In fact, he was proclaimed as much by Pele, who knew a thing or two about giving defenses nightmares, given how many defenders he probably gave sleepless nights. But not just by him, even a man named Franz Beckenbauer, the Kaiser of German football, who's widely regarded as one of the greatest defenders ever, said that Moore was up there with the best. He is currently England's third most capped player and was at one point their most capped player in history. In fact, he had a legendary career domestically in West Ham as well, where he captained them 2 FA Cup wins. And when he tragically passed away at age 51 due to cancer, he was given a public funeral, which was the first of a kind for any footballer in England. You can't think of a better tribute to give to one of the all-time legends of the game. His centre-back partner would be John Terry. Now, the man who was seen by many as a natural leader, both due to his in-game ability and his leadership and organizational skills. John Terry was someone who captained Chelsea to every major honour possible, leading a stellar career in the South West London club. Now, his time at the club coincided with them becoming a major force both domestically and in Europe, and it's fair to say that Terry was a key part of it. Oftentimes, you have players where it seems like the old meets the new, and Terry was very much in the middle of both of those. His playing style drew heavily from the no-nonsense, rugged style of defenders of old age, but he also combined that with an ability to read the game better than anyone and skillfully organize defenses when called for. He was also an underrated ball player and possessed a very good passing range and a natural threat from set pieces due to his ability in the air. Terry was at one point also England captain, although off-field controversies, which you can troll pretty much any English tabloid for, saw him ended up getting stripped from the captaincy not once, but twice. Yet regardless of whatever it is that he did off the field, on field, he remains one of the greatest English defenders to have ever graced the game. At left back, we'd have Ashley Cole, who, as John Terry's teammate at Chelsea, was himself no stranger to being part of the tabloid pages on a more than regular basis. In fact, his off-field behavior dominated headlines to the point that not a day went by when tabloids didn't have at least one salacious whole story. Yet, people tend to forget that he was arguably at one point one of the best in his position, if not the best. Cole was someone who, at a time when the role of a fullback was evolving, managed to meet both old school and new school. Not only was he very good going forward, but defending was top notch. In fact, it was epitomized by the fact that he would make a number of goal line blocks at the very last minute. He had 107 England caps, and that itself should tell you, just with that sheer level of longevity, how highly regarded he was by a number of managers. He might have been the darling of the British tabloids due to a scandalous off-field life, yet on the field, he delivered the goods on a frighteningly consistent basis. It's safe to say that even till today, England are yet to see a left back of his calendar. Now we move on to the midfield, and the first person who we have to mention here at right midfield would be David Beckham. Part major celebrity, part iconic footballer, but an all-time star of the game, Beckham was one of the first celebrity footballers of the modern era and remains one of the most defining in that regard. Golden Balls, as he was fondly known, saw his good looks become a key part of any marketing ad campaign, and his face was splashed over posters all across the world. Yet, don't let his marketability distract from the fact that when he was on, he was one of England's best players ever. Playing in a wide right position that at one point was typified more for physical rather than skillful attributes, Beckham became an icon mostly because he was more skilled than anyone who ever played that role. His Hollywood passes of 50-yard passes that could effortlessly pick out a running teammate became the stuff of legend. And his free kicks, which inspired not only a book but a movie as well, Bend It Like Beckham, became the stuff of legend due to a rare combination of finesse, power, and technique that was honed by hours and hours of practice. Perhaps the one thing that works against Beckham was the fact that he was seen as the pin-up boy of England's golden generation, which, despite having a stellar star squad, never really won anything at international level. Yet, that cannot take away from the fact that Beckham was successful not only in England, in Spain, and in America as well. In fact, his next innings as a team owner currently sees him owning MLS side Inter Miami. It remains to be seen how successful he'll be there, but nothing takes away from the fact that he is truly all-time England great. At centre midfield, we'd have Paul Gascoigne. Now, Paul Gascoigne's career is one that inspires emotions of marvel, regret, inspiration, and also a sense of what could have been. The man was described at one point as one of the most naturally talented players to ever come out of England. Yet there remains a sense that were it not for his well-publicized personal demons, he might have accomplished so much more on the field. Now, this isn't a dig on mental health or alcoholism-related issues either. Rather, it's simply a case of fans wanting more for Gaza, the man who everyone loved. Because on his day, few in the world could match his ability when it came to taking on and dominating opponents. Of course, he was helped with the fact that he was quite the personality off the field as well, and that ended up making him a beloved figure in England. Good example of that can be seen in the 1990 World Cup. England would go on to lose in the semi-finals against eventual winners Germany, and Paul Gascoigne, who came into the match on one yellow card, ended up receiving a second booking against Germany. Knowing that now he had been booked another time, he burst into tears because he knew that if England made the final, he'd not be a part of it. That image is so iconic that it made him a beloved figure in England. And lest we forget, England is a club, or a country rather, that focuses highly on hard-men footballers. Gascoigne became a legend by crying. I think that says enough about just what a legendary figure he was. His partner in centre midfield was someone Manchester United fans would be familiar with, Bobby Charlton. Now, Bobby Charlton has had quite the one-in-a-kind career. After all, how many footballers or sports people in general can say that they survived an air crash and then ended up to become a legend of the game? And that's exactly what Charlton did. He survived the 1958 Munich air disaster, and many felt that he was probably even lucky to be walking after that. Yet, he not only came back to the sport that he loved, he went on to have an all-time legendary career. Starting his career in a more advanced attacking role in midfield, he became a consistent goal scorer and over time ended up moving further down the field. Yet, his game time was so good at United that he ended up holding two major records with them for a very long time, that of the most appearances and of the most goals. Ryan Giggs would end up surpassing his appearances record in 2008, but in 2017, Rooney would finally break Bobby Charlton's record of scoring 249 Manchester United goals. Yet, that doesn't take away from the fact that that record was stood for such a long time. And it doesn't take away from just how influential Charlton was for England. After all, he scored a number of goals in 1966, which was, of course, the tournament that they ended up winning. And completing the midfield quartet would be Tom Finney. Now, Tom Finney is not someone who most modern fans would be familiar with. He's a bit of a rare case on the list in the sense that he didn't achieve much in the way of trophies. In fact, the only trophy he ever won was a second division title in 1951. It's also notable that he didn't really play for one of the bigger clubs in England. In fact, he spent his entire career at boyhood club Preston North End. But what a career it was, because he is still there considered one of the finest footballers to ever come out of England. At home on either side of the wings, he became such a key part to his player that at one point, newspapers claimed that he should claim income tax rebates for the fact that he carried 10 other men on the field. Now, that seems like a bit of an exaggeration or just an overestimation of how great he was. The fact is that a season after he retired, Preston North End ended up getting relegated. In fact, his greatness was sung widely by many players and managers of that time, with one of his biggest admirers being the legendary Liverpool manager Bill Shankly. The fact that he would sing praises for an opposition player says it all. And now for the two strikers, where there was quite a bit of choice, but the first choice would be Gary Lineker. Now, modern day fans would mostly know Lineker as someone who hosts the popular football show Match of the Day. And of course, they'd also know him for his consistently hilarious social media commentary. But it's worth noting that Lineker was an extremely fine player in his day, and even back then had a successful stint abroad playing for Barcelona, at a time when English players moving abroad was not necessarily seen as par from the course. Lineker was someone who knew exactly where the back of the net was. In fact, if you go back and check his records, he's the only player to have been the highest scorer in a season with 3 different clubs across 3 different seasons. He's also England's third highest goal scorer behind Wayne Rooney and Bobby Charlton, having scored 48 international goals. Besides that, he's also England's highest goal scorer across World Cups. But there's something else that made Lineker a legend of his time, and it was the fact that besides knowing where the back of the net was, he was also an extremely fair player. In 16 years of playing, he never received a single red or yellow card. He also ended up putting up a six-figure sum that saved one of his clubs, Leicester City, from bankruptcy. Leicester, of course, would eventually go on to lift a fairy tale Premier League title trophy in 2016. But were it not for Lineker's money, they'd probably have been bankrupt. It just goes to show you that not all heroes, my friends, wear capes. And joining Lineker in that side, and the final person in the playing 11 would be Wayne Rooney. Now, Wayne Rooney was fondly referred to as Waza by his teammates, in reference to the fact that his playing style was a lot similar to Gaza or Paul Gascoigne, who we covered before. Now, a quick look at him would be easy to understand why that was the case. Rooney, of course, was a creative force who could play either as an out-and-out forward or in a slightly withdrawn role. His prolific goal scoring was matched by his ability to change games, whether it be with surging runs or excellent passes from deep or close by. As such, Rooney was the first choice for both club and country, yet sadly that would end up leading to his eventual decline, coming sooner than expected, because he played so many games, picked up so many niggling injuries, that his decline came much quicker than many thought. It's amazing that people look back at his career and think he could have accomplished more, yet ask any United fan and they'd be more than happy with the amount of glory that man led them to. Last but not least is of course the manager, who in this case would be Alf Ramsey. Now it's worth noting that managers with bigger or better CVs have been at the helm of the England national team. Of course, we're looking at you, Fabio Capello and Sven-Göran Eriksson. Yet, none of these men, whether it be Fabio Capello, Eriksson, or any other high-profile name who managed the three lions, could ever win a major international trophy for them. Ramsey makes it on this list simply due to the fact that he won England's only major international trophy till date. Now, Ramsey was someone who was seen as ahead of his time because not only did his focus look solely at the tactical side of things, but his systems were revolutionary and ahead of their time. At a point of time when England and indeed the world would focus on wingers on either side who were pacey, Ramsey wanted his wingers to be like attacking midfielders and focus more on the central side of things. Now, if that sounds familiar to you fans, that's because most modern football plays out that way. In fact, Ramsey was not only a great manager but a great player too, and remains till this date the only manager to have ever been inducted into England's Hall of Fame twice, once as a manager and once as a player. And right here we can see exactly how all these England greats would line up in a formation that was one of the most commonly used in English football for quite a while, the flat 4-4-2. This formation featured an emphasis on playing through the wings and on two strikers, causing opposition defenses plenty of trouble. It is exactly the kind of formation that all these legends would excel at. Thank you so much everyone for joining us on this list. If you enjoyed watching this, as always, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Definitely leave a comment below, because I'm sure there'll be plenty of you who would be thinking, my favorite player wasn't included. I'm going to get outraged at the anchor. So please go right ahead. Let me know in the comment section how wrong you think I am or how right you think this list is. And as always, don't forget that if you want the best of sports coverage, you must look no further than Sports Loom.